Hello and welcome to the next episode. Joining me today is John Garrison.
Hello. How you doing?
How are you, John?
I'm good, thanks, mate. I'm good.
Tell me where you are.
I am in a hotel in Belgium somewhere. I've got no idea where it is. We've got a day off. Yeah, I don't know. Hang on. If I have a look at me Google Maps, I'll find out where I am.
Is it a decent hotel? Is it good?
Yeah, hotel's all right. But I mean, we're right next to the motorway. So we're not in a, I am near, hold on, zooming out. Never heard of that place. Ghent. I'm near Ghent. Yeah.
No, I've never heard of that myself,
Ghent,
actually. No.
Away. So we're just here for the day. It's quite a complicated day because we've got a festival with James Blunt. We've got a festival tomorrow, but the bus had to drive to Denmark for the gig the day after. And so we had to pack lightly because we're on a private jet after the gig tomorrow.
Oh, man.
To get to Denmark to meet the truck.
Grim. I love tour logistics. You're making me think of my old touring stuff that fills me with dread.
I mean, I was, when the tour manager was trying to explain it, I was just like, just tell me what to do and how many pairs of pants I need to pack. And he goes, right, 2 pairs of pants and get off the bus.
How many dates are you in at the moment? Is it like hundreds, like a couple of months kind of thing?
Well, I mean, we did the UK in February. I think that was 3 weeks. And then we went around Europe for 4 weeks. We did a couple of gigs. We did one gig in Mexico City. And then we went to, I can't remember, Middle East. We went to Dubai and to Saudi Arabia.
Nice.
And now we're doing the European leg, more Europe, and then starting to go into the festivals. And then we go through the festivals throughout the summer. Do
you have a kind of favourite, type of venue or place or any of that? Or does it all just kind of blur into one? Or
yeah, I mean, I like the smaller ones, really, if I'm totally honest.
I completely agree with you.
The gig in Luxembourg last night was brilliant, a little club gig. And the gig before in Milan, I think it was Milan, that was like 8,000, 10,000 people, which is, it's great. I mean, you get, the energy of 10,000 people is pretty amazing, but you don't get to see the whites of their eyes, whereas in the club last night, we were, you could see everyone all from front to back.
Absolutely. You can, I kind of feel when you're doing the big stages and the big theaters and the big arenas and stuff, it's like this big abyss that you're just looking out into. Whereas when you're in those little clubs and stuff like that, it's so you can actually see the audience and you can see that they're enjoying themselves, and you can just interact with them more, can't you? And just
it's much more interactive. That's exactly the word. Whereas the stadium gigs are great as well. I mean the roar of 10,000 people is something to behold. But I mean, if I had to pick, I would pick the club gigs every time.
Yeah, nice. So John, how did you, going back a couple of years and stuff then, so like, we've known each other for quite a long time now and stuff, like I remember listening to, I first sort of really got onto your music and stuff with like Satellites 01 kind of thing. Tell us a little bit about that and how did you start writing? How did you, where did it all kind of start for you, getting into music?
Well, I mean, I've always done music. I always knew I was going to do music. I grew up my dad was the head of music at Warwick University. So I actually grew up on the campus. We lived on campus.
Wow.
I don't think you can do that these days, but we actually got given a little bungalow on the campus. So
wow.
I used to go and walk to go and see my dad. And there was like kettle drums and harps and grand pianos, all these classical instruments lying around. So my earliest memory is just messing about on these instruments, and obviously when I was little, these instruments were massive. I remember seeing a harp, and just thinking it was the most beautiful sound and the biggest thing I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
So I was always surrounded by music. But obviously I like the pop music. The rest of my family is all classical. So it was a bit of a contentious issue within the house. Like, because my dad didn't want me doing pop. My mum, and that's what I wanted to do.
Why did you, why did your dad not want you doing pop? Was it
he passed away now, but he was a classical music snob.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah.
He was a music snob. Yeah. So he just looked down his nose at everything like that. But I mean, I kind of managed to find some music that he liked a little bit later on when he was a bit older, but he was very snobby. And yeah, he didn't believe that you could mix the two. Classical was the only music for him. And he was a brilliant violinist. So, wow. That's what he was into. Really.
You clearly got a load of musical, a lot of your musical talents and stuff from having that influence around you then, and having,
and just making noises, like just messing about on instruments as a kid, I feel quite lucky because most 4-year-olds don't know what a harp sounds like. You know what I mean? I was messing about on one, and then I'll be messing about on something else, and then so I just had this rich array of sounds that I knew was available.
Wow.
And so that was kind of what I did. So I always did music, and then a bit later on, my dad basically sort of fell out with the system. He didn't like the way he was being taught music, so he actually pulled me out of music lessons at school. Right. So he just basically just said, "Look, go do it yourself." And so I don't read music or anything like that. I just taught myself everything by ear. Which means I don't follow any rules. So brilliant. That's how I got into music, really. And then I was in a band when I was 12. I was a drummer in a band. The rest of the band were all 18, and I was gigging around Coventry. And that was sort of my first experience. Having to ask the pubs if I was allowed in to do the gig. And then usually I was allowed in if my mum or dad was there.
Yeah.
And then and that was it. From there, I was just gigging. I knew that's what I wanted to do. So
right, fantastic.
Left school as soon as I was legally allowed, and then the rest is history, really.
Amazing. And then presumably it was just a case of just like from the small pubs and everything, you eventually jumped on tours and started writing for people and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to be. I was going to be a drummer. I didn't even question that.
Right.
And it was only when I left, when I was asked to join a band, and then they already had a drummer. So they were like, well, can you play bass? I was like, well, I've messed about on the bass. And so started doing that, and we got signed to Sony, a record deal. Wow. And so suddenly I was mixing with all these big producers and big studios, and we got dropped by Sony, but I made all these connections with these people.
Amazing.
And they were like, we like your bass playing. Can you come and play on this? Can you come and play on that? And that's kind of how I started the session world, basically. But the whole time I was writing and recording my own music, and that's sort of what I love doing. That was my passion thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was in a band where I was singing and writing the songs, and then we got signed to Republic, Universal. And that's kind of how that all started. Yeah, it's quite a weird story, really, because I still do my own music, but playing for other people is how I pay the mortgage. Right. So it's kind of like, so I think to be able to do music full time these days, you have to be able to do a few things, I think.
Absolutely. So, I completely agree. I think like what's so interesting about your story is that I actually feel that it completely mirrors my own in terms of, like gigging and all that stuff. The only thing is that I didn't drop out of college. I stayed right the way through. But I found that the whole journey was just like, I just never slept. I just completely, every single day was just grinding and grafting and, up and down.
Absolutely. I had a really good work ethic.
Yeah.
Like from the age of 14, I'd say I was doing a minimum of 4 to 5 hours practice every single day. I would run home from school and just play drums for an hour, and then play bass for 2 or 3 hours, and then I'd get on my little sequencer, that was a workstation. Yeah, and that was I didn't have a computer for ages, so I did it all on a Roland W30 workstation.
Yeah, nice.
And I just grafted it, I just knew that I had to put I already knew about the 10,000 hours rule.
Yeah.
And so, my dad had told me about that. So I was just like, well, if I do all my work now, I won't have to do it later. And that's kind of that's kind of true, you know. I mean, I don't have to practice on the bass.
I find that any musical projects that I've ever been involved in, whether it's like writing or gigging or playing or practicing music or anything, I kind of feel that whenever it is trying too hard, it doesn't work. And I was going to ask if that is sort of a similar experience to you. I find like the best projects that I've ever been in, you know, the best tours or the best songs I've ever written, it's kind of come through effortlessly rather than it being like a, you know, like I can sort of recall loads of times where I've been slogging my guts out to try and get on a, you know, a particular gig or try and get something on the radio or that kind of thing. And then you know, later on,
it never worked.
Yeah. And like no plan has ever worked out. And when I've all but given up and just kind of done something for a laugh, that's when it's actually worked. You know, do you have a similar experience?
You can want something too much, I think, you know. That's definitely the case for me when I was younger. I was desperate for a record deal, you know, and then I got one. I was like, oh, you know, and then you realise that the record deal is actually it's a tiny part of the bigger puzzle.
Yeah.
You know, and then you get a song on the radio, and you think that's gonna, and then you get one on the radio, and you're like, oh, right, okay, that's just one part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
You learn that it's about everything. You can have the best song in the world, but if you haven't got the right people behind it or the right backup or whatever, everything has to be in place, you know, and you still need the element of luck and all that stuff. But I do think that if you've put the graft in, if you put the hours in, then when you do get your opportunities, then you're ready to go.
So it's almost like putting the work in is all about setting up the infrastructure first, isn't it? And then the kind of the luck element, should it happen.
Yeah. And then being able to deliver when the opportunity comes, you know, when that window opens, you can't go, right, okay, I'm going to start practicing now.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be ready to go, you know, with everything, whether that's songwriting, whether that's bass playing, whether that's singing, you know, whether that's, you got the best song in the world, you know, you got to be ready.
That's a really good point. Yeah, definitely. How did you you know, start, how did you meet James Blunt? You know, how did you get, you know?
So basically, when I was, going back to that band that I was in that was signed to Sony, when we got in the studio, I ended up working, getting to know this, basically our tour manager. Actually, it wasn't even a tour manager, he was a roadie, basically. He just set up all our gear, this one guy called Hemershoe. And he basically, when the band fell up, I kind of lost contact with him. And then out of the blue, he just called me and just said, oh, I've got this audition in Birmingham for this singer called Bitty McLean. And he, in the mid-90s, he was like a sort of reggae act, pop act.
Right.
And so I got the job. That was my first session job. I didn't, you know, and I got a job. And the drummer was a guy called Carl Brazil.
Yeah.
From Birmingham. And so he was 17, I think. And I was like 21 or whatever it was. So we were these two young white kids in a Rastafarian reggae band in Birmingham. So, you know, we kind of like, we immediately bonded. And then we basically went on tour with Bitty McLean, and we supported Wet, 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 you know, in their heyday. And then we went to Hawaii, all these reggae festivals. And we just stayed mates. And so, you know, jump to 15 years later, I was living in New York, and he just says, oh, I'm playing in New York with this singer-songwriter called James Blunt. I was like, oh yeah, I've heard that song on the radio. We all have.
Yeah.
And then, so I went along to it, and he goes, well, you know, what are you doing? You know, what are you doing for the next year and a half? I was like, well, why? He goes, well, because we need a bass player.
Nice.
And that was it. It was as simple as that. I went on tour for a year, and I put all my stuff in storage in New York. And then I went on tour for a year and a half. And that was 14 years ago.
Wow.
I'm still playing with him now.
Wow.
And Carl, the band as well.
And Carl is as well?
Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. Do you know, I met Carl, it was years ago.
That was him who just called me.
Oh, was it? No way. Do you know, I met him so briefly, but it must have been like 10 years ago or something, you know, 15, maybe even 15 years ago. I don't even know. But like, it was like, since then, I've seen Carl's name pop up on a couple of shows and stuff. But I had no idea that he was still with James at the moment. That's really cool.
He does a lot of gigs. He plays for James Blunt. He does Robbie Williams. He's actually hopping off this tour to do Robbie Williams next week.
Yeah, nice.
But me and him, we're sort of quite a well-known rhythm section now, so we do a lot of recording. So nearly all the bass sessions that I do involve him as well.
Brilliant.
Because we get called in as a duo, as a rhythm section.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so cool. I'm so proud of you for putting that together. That's so it's like amazing amount of work. Do you know what? Like from circling back to that point, the sort of the effortlessness. You know what you just said then with the James Blunt tour just kind of happened. It just kind of like, I got this guy James Blunt and I'm free. There we go. Let's go. I mean, like that is that point in practice for me. Like you spent years and years trying to, get right songs and all that stuff. And then one day just a phone call happens and a coincidence and it's like, oh, there we go. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm totally, I have to be honest. I mean, because at the time I was an artist,
Yeah.
I was gigging around New York. I was having the time of my life. I had a manager there and, but I was absolutely skint, So for me, it was a double-edged sword, really, because it was like, do you want to go around the world? Brilliant, yeah. But then it meant I had to stop doing my own music for a year and a half.
Of course.
So it was a trade-off, So I did have. It was, but I spent my whole life absolutely skint. I'd never had a penny.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And suddenly for the first time in my life, I might actually have some money. I was told what I would earn for a year and a half. I was like, pretty much
blown away.
Yeah, I was kind of like, well, do you know what? I've never experienced anything like that, so I'm going to do it. And that was the thinking behind it.
Wow.
But I do wonder what would have happened if I just stuck with the music,
How does that make you? How does that make you feel? I was going to ask you, is that something that weighs on you, or do you not care, or what do you?
A little bit, if I'm being totally honest, it does a little bit.
Interesting.
Because I mean, the week before I went on tour, I'd sold out Mercury Lounge in New York.
Oh, man, wow.
So it was like I was getting people at gigs. And I was getting a name, and I was getting a slight interest from labels and stuff like that. But like I said, I was busking on the subway, to pay my rent.
Yeah.
So I was absolutely skint. So I don't beat myself up too much because, I made that decision and I sort of stuck with it, and I stick with it. But I do wonder. I see sometimes, I wonder if,
Yeah.
But that's not how life works, is it? That's not how life is.
And the practicalities of life have to happen, don't they? You've got to pay the rent, and you've got to, and especially,
Exactly.
especially like, if you want to do sort of normal life things like start a family, and there's like all of that stuff. Like slowly, do you feel like you're a family man yourself? Is that like, did that slowly start becoming your priority over the music, or? Has it found its own slot within it?
It's a different thing. You can't take one away from the other.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, if you took my music away, then I wouldn't be a particularly good dad anyway.
Right.
Do you know what I
right.
mean? It's all part of it. So you can't pick or choose.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I love my family. It's what drives me, but the music is always there. It's always there. You can't switch it off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I wouldn't have met my wife, had I turned that gig down. So there's loads of, it's one of them. You can't really ask. It's so much has happened with that one decision.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I can't spend too long wondering what if.
Yeah, of course.
I do sometimes.
Have you got any plans to record more stuff or anything?
I'm doing it at the moment. I'm actually. Before you called, I was in the studio last week recording some drums for my next record. So flew to London. I went to Guy Chambers' studio, and then I smashed out the drums for 14 songs. And now I'm just going through everything and editing them, which is when I'm on tour is the perfect time to do that, because I don't have the time when I'm at home. I've got 2 kids. I've got a wife. I can't work on my own music so much. So that is kind of like the other benefit of touring is I can actually work on my own music for a lot longer than I would be able to.
It's surprising how much time you get on tour, isn't it? Just to yourself.
Yeah.
And I found touring I don't know about you. I mean, if you can sort of tell me your take on it, but I found touring. It's hard. I mean, it's unanimously and ubiquitously difficult, in terms of logistics and hotels and buses and all that kind of stuff. And that goes without saying. But like, I found the repetitiveness of it, and especially the hotel rooms and all that kind of stuff. I just kind of got into a funk with it where I was getting a little bit bored of it, and which is probably the wrong attitude, admittedly. But I found that
I've got certain rules. Yeah, I mean, I've got rules, that I've sort of applied. So, whenever I get in my hotel room, I set up my music stuff before I've even taken my shoes or jacket off.
Right.
I've got all these little things, and I've got my gym shoes, all my running shoes by the door out ready.
Right.
So, because this is just stuff I've learned over time, because if you don't do that, then you don't bother doing your music. You don't bother going to the gym. You end up just sticking the telly on and your day's gone.
Yeah.
So there's like, it's a discipline. It is a discipline, but, I can't really show you on the computer, but I've done it here, all my music stuff's all set up. And like I said, I did it as soon as I got in.
Right. Interesting.
But it's a lot. There's a lot of self-discipline in touring, I think.
Definitely.
It is what you make of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can just do nothing and get bored. But I mean, I always make a point of going into the city of where I am.
I used to do that as well. I used to, whenever there was one hotel that I stayed in, there was a fire in the hotel. And I have this, and I'd heard about, there was I can't remember the guy's name, but he used to stay in hotels regularly, and there was a program or something about him. I don't think he was in music. He was in some, engineering or something. But his whole regime of going into different hotels was to pace out where the fire exits were before he stayed in any. Yeah. And I remember just sort of even that night, sort of remembering the program I'd seen the night before. And then that night there was this fire. And I was like, I know where the exits are. Don't worry, guys. But I used to sort of mentally clock that. And then, like you said, I used to go into the cities and just try and have a look around and and all that, and just try and imbibe some of the stuff. Sometimes I do gigs actually, and go and do a little bit of a busk on the street or something, or
I think you've got to do it as you go nuts, and I've seen people go nuts, and then they give up, they're like, I don't want to do this anymore, and then they go and do something else, and then they sort of remember they forgot how good it was.
Yeah.
To tour as a musician, because you can also get sucked into the negative bubble.
Oh yeah,
where
totally.
you kind of before you know it, you're not even noticing the good stuff. You're focusing on everything that's bad.
Yeah.
And then it stops, and then you go, oh, actually, it wasn't that bad, was it? It wasn't. Not like working down a coal mine, is it? It was
exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
So it's the case of just it's all mental health, positive mental thinking, and I mean me and a few of the boys are really big on the whole positive thinking thing.
Yeah.
We're all reading personal development books all the time.
Yeah.
And then when I go to the gym, on my phone, I've got all these personal development audio books, and to just give you tips on not getting into that negative space that you can do when you're on your own.
Definitely.
All the time.
It's so easy to brood and things when,
Absolutely.
where, especially in an environment like a touring environment, or a tour bus or something, where you're quite isolated from your friends, your family, and it's sort of you're living with a family of 10 people, 20 people or something. And I used to have an experience like that where there was a person I was touring with who every single night would just be like, oh, this is, the kitchen's miles away and it's rubbish and all that. And I used to sort of walk out and be like, yeah, but we're on a stage and all you're doing is playing a bass guitar, what's the problem? And
exactly. Some people just don't have a clue. I mean, some people don't know what it's like in the normal world, so they think that
right,
you're a musician and touring, they think that is hard work, which it is, but it's not hard work compared to working in a factory.
Absolutely. And like I've been doing a lot of stuff in education this last year. And man, the teachers work like it's just round the clock, and so there's that element of like, oh, I don't miss, the fact that like in teaching, for example, there's a lot of like paperwork and things, and like with touring, it's like, oh no, I think I'll just go and chill now, or I'll go into the city, or it's like horses for courses, isn't it? So what kind of like, do you have any like advice or anything, or I don't know. I hate the word tips, but like like sort of tips, advice, anything that you think is valuable to sort of young people or whatever wanting to get into.
Well, what would I say? I mean, what I've learned over the past few years is that, well, how do I say it really? Put it this way: when I got the audition with James, when I went to the audition, the bass playing bit was the easy part. You know, he just said, "Okay, well, you can obviously play. Let's go out." And then we went out, and it was the night out that got me the job.
Right.
Because there's absolutely no space for egos. And that was my point. It's like, it doesn't matter how fucking good you are. The guy loading up the truck doesn't give a shit if you're good or bad.
Yeah.
You just have to be nice.
Yeah. Completely.
And your bus driver doesn't give a fuck if you're a genius or not. He just wants you to be nice and look at and respect his bus.
Yeah.
And so I learned fairly early on just to leave the ego at the door. Everybody's on the same team, and I know that there was once we were in tour in America for 3 months solidly, and I remember going to the fridge and someone had put the butter in, but it was empty. And I remember going fucking mental. I was like, who the fuck has done that? And I was like, hang on a minute. I might be overreacting here. And so then I realized that I'd completely been sucked into this, of this unreasonable tour bubble. And so ever since then, I'm kind of like very, very aware of, if I get irritated, it's probably me. It's probably not the other person. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I've learned to take that split second before you say something, have a think, before you say anything, before you decide on whether to sort of have a go. Again, I think the whole thing comes down to mental health, and I work on it every single day. It's like, I don't take it for granted. You have to really, really focus and then, and leave the ego at the door. I think that's my biggest tip I can give to any kids, because I didn't do that when I was younger.
Right.
I didn't. I wanted everyone to know how fucking good I was.
Yeah, of course.
And so I kept telling them how good I was, and I kept showing them. And then when they weren't respecting it enough, I'd get pissed off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course,
of course. But then you soon realise I'm just one cog in a machine, and any one cog doesn't work, you're fucked.
Yeah,
and James is brilliant with that. He's absolutely brilliant. If there's one bad apple, which is, 14 years I've been with him. There's been, I think, 2 instances where I'm obviously not going to name names, but where somebody goes a little bit maybe out there station, so to speak, and boom, they're out.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They're gone forever. Because he's a military man. So if you have one bad apple in your tank, he's going to get you killed.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like no tolerance for any of that. Yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah.
The minute any one of us starts to show any signs of having a bit of an ego, whatever, he'll just take you on one side and say, "Look, this isn't happening. This got to stop."
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then you're out. So that's like. That's what I would say to all these kids. No, leave your ego at the door.
Just could you talk to me about a little bit about like your songwriting and stuff? Then, like how do you go about writing songs and things? I mean, I know you've been doing sort of sessions and things with Ed Sheeran, haven't you? And some lots of other artists and stuff. What is your input, and how do you go about with your ideas and getting them into motion?
There's no set way to write a song. There isn't a set way. It's different every time. I mean, generally, I'll have a bunch of chord progressions, either in my head or I've messed around with on the piano, and then I've got a lyric pad at home, which is kind of slowly being replaced by my phone, like everyone else. Yeah. And I've literally, if on pages on here, if I open it up, I've probably got, all these are song ideas,
Nice.
Literally, there's hundreds of them, and some of them are just one line. Some of them are fully finished songs. And so every now and then I'll sit down and I'll match the chord progressions that I've worked on with the lyrics that I've worked on. But then it's different. But like I said, the sitting down with the guitar and writing and sitting down with the piano writing, I'm bored of that now. So I try and do different things. So my last record was completely written on my laptop. So like basically on piano roll on Logic, I just drew the chords in. And until they sounded good, and then learned it on the guitar. If you know what I mean. I did it the wrong way around, and then it just made me move away from your generic chord structures.
When you're a bass player or a guitarist or something, you tend to learn and see everything by shapes, don't you? You sort of your hand goes there, and you know. So I suppose anything that mixes up the shapes.
But when you're working with when I'm working with Logic, that is also just shapes. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and that's how my brain completely works. It needs to be in symmetry and it needs to look right. It needs to be the right pattern, or there needs to be a good reason to not do that. If you know what I mean. So to mess things up deliberately as well. And so this the record I'm on now. Basically, I'm working on. I've written it pretty much on a bass. Actually, it's all bass lines. Nice. So it's all like jamming on a bass line on a bass, and then fitting chords around that. And then for this particular record, just to keep myself entertained. I'm changing all the middle eights. So all the middle sections of the songs they could almost be a song on their own.
Right.
It's completely rather than just. Move into a few different chords for a few beats. It's completely different. So it'll change time signature, change key, change speed, even tempo. There's one song I'm working on today. It jumps up 15 beats per minute just for the middle eight, and then it jumps back down again.
Nice, nice.
It doesn't sound difficult. I used to be a big prog rock fan. When I was younger, I used to listen to all the prog rock stuff. And I kind of got back into it a little bit. So I've been kind of looking at where the bands I used to listen to, what they were listening to. Do you know what I mean? Right, so I've been listening to like really old Genesis and Silver Apples and all these like mad bands, from what they're called 12th Night and all these really, really massively proggy bands.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And I forgot how much I loved it. Do you know what I mean? I forgot. I love all that stuff. I love stuff that isn't four chords. Do you know what I mean? I love the pop. I love the pop melodies and all that, but I love the slightly songs that are complicated but don't necessarily sound it.
I'm totally with you. Totally with you. I actually recently I've been doing a lot of like co-writes and stuff recently, and they're all for like releases in the next few years, and some of them's like next month, and it's like but most of it's all pop related, so like you say, it's like 3 chords, 4 chords, that kind of thing. And then I got home and randomly my Spotify was like, Ben, here's something that you might like, and it was playing like loads of like old Chick Corea and that kind of gear, and I was just like, it's ages since I've heard this, but it's so refreshing to get back into that headspace, thinking of all these like mental riffs and progressions, and it's like you say, it's refreshing, isn't it, to like
it is, but I think you can
work on other things.
I think it benefits what I'm doing. So
definitely,
when you go to work with these pop acts, like you're talking about working with Ed and with I just did Robbie Williams' album, his new album, and you bring it to the table. Do you know what I mean? It means you start looking at things differently. So even if it is a pop song, you maybe it's the little quirky bass, slightly off time thing that makes it stand out.
Makes the record.
I don't know. Do you know what I mean? But I think you need to. If you just keep playing what you've heard a million times, it ain't going to be what people want. They're going to hire anyone. They hire me. I like to think, because I've got a slightly more thought out baseline or whatever.
Well, I don't think it's because it's like you know more. It's not because you know more techniques or you know more this. I think it's just because you see fundamentally that music and your personality are the same thing, and it's like, you as you've grown as an artist and as a character, that has informed your musical taste and your musical experiences and all those kinds of things. Do you think, do you think music informs other things about our lives, or does it have no relevance, or what do you think?
Well, I think it has a part in everyone's life, doesn't it? I mean, music is like a smell, isn't it? You can hear a song, and you're immediately back to where you were when it was significant to you. Do you know
Absolutely.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's not just musicians. That's everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
You can hear a song and suddenly go, oh my God, that was when I was on holiday when I was 18. Do you know what I mean? Or that reminds me of my dad. I remember being in the car when I heard it. So it's a huge. You can't separate life from music, really. It's all intertwined, isn't it?
I agree, completely agree. I mean, I was on a call with Nile Rodgers, and his whole his sentence that just said it all. He just said, "Music is life, life is music," and I was like, yeah. Completely know what that means. It resonates so deeply with me.
Yeah. I think where you really notice where it becomes very evident, rather, is when you look at a film. You can. I mean, if you watch a film with no music, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? and yet you can. I was watching this. What was I watching the other day? I was watching a film the other day, and it was a sad scene, but there's no music. And I was just watching it, and after about, I don't know, 30 or 40 seconds of this scene, the music kicked in, and it was the music that triggered me. I was like, I'd already been watching this scene for like half a minute. Do you know what I mean? But it was the music that unlocked the emotion.
Yeah, yeah. You big girl.
I know I was like, I can't believe it. It was something daft as well. But it was something that's not cry-worthy. But I'm always crying at movies anyway. But
you softy.
I can't watch E.T. without crying. I mean,
no one can. No one can, John. That's it.
You can't trust anyone who doesn't cry at E.T. But I sort of noticed this on myself. I was like, wow, it took the music to unlock the emotion in me. And I think Amazing. That's the same for everybody, but they're just, don't know why.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting. What's next for you then, John? What's what's on the cards in the near future?
Well, I've got this tour. This tour with James runs till September the 2nd, and then hopefully by then I will have finished my next record. I'll focus on that after that. There's lots of stuff that I've played on that's coming out this year, which is good. I've got a song that I wrote with Robbie, a Christmas song I wrote with Robbie, has just been covered by a Swedish artist, so and translated into Swedish, which is interesting.
Wow, I can't wait to hear that.
That's coming out for Christmas. Just something about it makes it sounds even more Christmassy than when Robbie did it.
Really?
Because you don't know what's going on. It's all Swedish, but it just sounds like ABBA. But that's coming out. I've got Lewis Capaldi. I've done the bass on his next record, so that's coming out in the summer, hopefully. Ed Sheeran's next record. I don't know when that's coming out, but I've played on that and all. So I've got mostly. I'm just carrying on doing what I'm doing.
Keeping on. Aren't we all? That's it.
Yeah, exactly. What you have to do as a musician, isn't it? I don't know what's going on. Mate.
Never ends.
Yeah. No idea what's happening next year, but I'll worry about that next year.
Yeah, that's next year's problem, definitely. All right, John. Well, listen, I'm so grateful for you for jumping on this call. It's so amazing listening to all the stuff you're doing, and I can't wait to hear all the records. And hopefully, we'll get to have a beer or something on, when you're next in town or something. I'm sure it'll happen.
Let's do that.
Yeah, sounds
That'd
good.
Be awesome.
But no, seriously, really, really appreciate you jumping on the call. It's really, really great to see you. And, I hope you say hello to Carl and say hello to James for me.
I will, mate.
All right, mate. Nice one. Thanks, John.
Good to speak to you.